Everybody, video here for you today. We're going to take a look at one more ancient site that goes back to the Younger Dryas period in this part of the world. Many ancient sites that go back that far in history. But this place is a little different than ones we have been looking at. It's right down here, lost to history. The ancient site of Murrybet is underneath the waters of Lake Assad today. It was researched between 1964 and 1974. Then has been lost to history under the waters of Lake Assad. Now here's a map I used in yesterday's video about those amazing 11,000-year-old faces at Tal Aswad. But I have talked about many of these places, Çatalhöyük just a few days ago, Navali Çoray when I read Klaus Schmidt's archaeological report on Göbekli Tepe, Halan Semi, Cerf El Ahmar. Abu Huraira place, research says 12,800 years ago, was wiped out by some sort of impact event. Tel Murrybet is just north of that. Here is a look at some of the ruins in Murrybet before the waters rose and covered this site for good. The translation of the name means covered, and I find that very interesting because people lived here from about 12,200 years ago to about 10,000 years ago, the exact same time when Göbekli Tepe was covered up. Here is a diagram of what they think some of these individual building units look like, and this certainly looks like what is at the site, or what was at the site at Cerf El Ahmar, a site that goes back before Göbekli Tepe in history. Now, even though the site was lost about 44 years ago, it finally went under. Research has been carried on with the findings here, and they think this place, even though the dating goes from 12,200 years ago to 10,000 years ago, they think this place was only inhabited for 1,500 of those years. And they make the correlation in one paper I read that says these Natufian cultures did not stay at one place for very long, and they gave a few reasons. And one of those reasons was catastrophic climate change. And this comes from the Younger Dryas period, so that makes the most sense to me. It says the first archaeological investigation of the site was carried out in 1964, and that year the site was noted during the archaeological survey of the region directed by Mortis N. van Loon of the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago. And it says, all excavations were part of a larger international and eventually UNESCO-coordinated effort to investigate as many archaeological sites as possible in the area that would be flooded by Lake Assad, the reservoir of the Topkapı Dam. It says the excavations have revealed 4 occupational phases ranging from Natufian up to the middle pre-pottery Neolithic B period. Total dates from 10,200 BC to 8,000 BC. But phase 1A is from 10,200 BC to 9,700 BC, and it ends right when the Younger Dryas period ends. It says the oldest of these remains consist of a round, semi-subterranean structure with a diameter of 6 meters or 20 feet. In the subsequent phases, slightly smaller roundhouses built at ground level also appeared, at least some of which were used simultaneously. The walls were built from compacted earth, sometimes reinforced with stones. Hearths and cooking pits were located outside the buildings. Harvested crops included barley and rye. Sickle blades and grinding stones are more common and show more use-wear, indicating that cereals became a more important component of the diet. It says the fauna of Murrybet changed significantly during the phases, but gazelles were found here, remains of gazelles. Also small animals and fish remains were found here. It also says they were hunting oryx, and these appeared to be a symbolic animal to them. These horns are found at Çatalhöyük and other Neolithic sites in the area. Here are some diagrams of the circular enclosures at Murrybet. You notice that one on the right there? That is pretty interesting geometry there. It just reminds me of these stories that came out last spring. Here's one of them. The builders of the world's oldest known temple had a surprising understanding of geometry. They think some of these temples were based on geometric plans. I covered this story during one of my ancient history news videos last May. It's a pretty interesting story on Göbekli Tepe. It seems these people in the Neolithic had a much broader base of knowledge than we ever gave them credit for. But it seems to me, and it's even written, that this site is poorly understood, and they're kind of still getting a grasp on it, even though it went underwater 44, 45 years ago. But here's a drawing of some of the artifacts that were found here, stone carvings. Here is what was carved on some of the stones. The ones on the left at Cerf El Ahmar, the ones on the right at Murrybet. but it seems these two places were definitely connected, the same beliefs, same cosmology, but that is what was carved on the stone here at these two places. Very interesting things we see in other parts of the world, things we see at Göbekli Tepe, serpents and other type of designs. And then we go over to this, and there is one stone that goes way back to the Younger Dryas period that has symbols carved in it. Here's another map of some of these ancient sites. Murrybet right there. These sites that go back over 12,000 years in history, and they extended all the way down here. And don't believe for a second if somebody tells you that culture didn't show up in Egypt till 7,000 years ago. That is total baloney. Just thought I'd do a video on this today. I'm going to move on to some longer videos that I'm putting together. A lot of reviewing for those, so some of you may wonder why a certain video isn't up yet. Well, I got dozens of texts to review, that's why. But I thought I'd talk about this. Very interesting. Lost under the waters of Lake Assad today. But in order to get a fix on what Göbekli Tepe is all about, you got to look at all these settlement areas around here. That's a 12,200-year-old site at Murrybet, translated to the covered place. Human history stops here. The exact time Göbekli Tepe was covered. I just think this is an important site to cover. Trying to find answers, you got to be thorough. But that's an interesting one to do. I believe the people here were documenting critical things that were happening at the time, and they erected a temple at Göbekli Tepe to memorialize some pretty critical events that were happening at that time in the world. Hope you thought that was cool. And you all have a very nice day.